thank you very much. Like it was said, my name's Fraser, and I'm a counselling psychologist in training up in Glasgow Caledonian University. And today I'm going to talk to you a little bit about, I'm hoping people can hear me, I'm going to try and not walk around too much. Today I'm going to talk a little bit about networking in psychology, and also kind of thinking outside the box. I'm aware that obviously this is a kind of inspiring careers event, so I'm hoping to maybe give you guys a bit of an understanding on another side of the coin where there's stuff outside of your studies that maybe you can take part in, that you can improvise with, and hopefully see some benefits in the same way that I have. Now, a lot, for me, those networking opportunities, things that have developed for me, have been around something that I developed about 1.5 years ago called GetPsyched. And this has been like an online platform for me where I create YouTube videos and I create blog content and social media content that started in June of 2017. And since then, there's been a lot of great networking opportunities that I'm going to go into a little bit of detail about, and hopefully you guys can pick up some tips as we go. So I'll give you a few aims for the presentation. So I'm going to give you an overview to me. I'm going to give you an overview to GetPsyched as well. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about what I discovered from GetPsyched. The main thing from this presentation for me is fundamentally to add value to you guys. I'm aware that this is a Saturday and it was 15 or 20 quid to buy a ticket here, which is about the week's salary of a psychology student. So I want to make sure that I'm adding the most amount of value to you. So at any point, I don't know how panel people feel about this, but if there's any point you want clarification, then please just say during the talk. I don't know if other people will want that. But you can also ask me questions at any point. You saw my email on the previous slide. You can email me. You can contact me over social media as well. So I really want to get that across, that my objective isn't necessarily just talk about myself, although it might sound a bit like that at times. I want to ensure that you guys are getting the most from this that you possibly can be. I'm also going to try and stick to time. So a little bit of background to me. I'm a counselling psychologist in training up in Glasgow, like I said. Are there any counselling psychology trainees or those qualified? There's two congregated by themselves at the back. Okay. There was much more for clinical. I was going to say that we should all have a scrap, but let's not do that. So yeah, I'm a counselling psychologist in training, which fundamentally meant I couldn't get on the clinical psychology course. That's not true. I did want to do the counselling psychology doctorate. I know there's a few questions that have come in previously about the route into counselling psychology. I'm going to cover a little bit about that, but I'm happy to answer questions at the end as well. So I work as a psychological counsellor at an organisation called First Psychology in Glasgow, and I also work as a therapist for an organisation called The Spark, which are like a relationship counselling organisation. And those two places are where I do my placement, fundamentally. In addition to this, I'm a psychology undergraduate tutor, so I teach at Glasgow Caledonian University where I study as well. I teach topics like social psychology, biological psychology, like cognitive human cognition, and the dreaded stats modules. And I've got a real passion for psychology, mental health, and encouraging psychologists and psychology trainees as much as I can. Yeah, so I work at a number of different organisations. The reason I put this up is that I actually do a lot of representative work for governing bodies too. So I work with SciPag. I'm the counselling psychology representative for the UK. I think SciPag have got some presence here. I thought they maybe had a stall. I don't know if I didn't see it. I did see their logo earlier. I also work with the Scotland branch of the BPS. I do some work with the counselling psychology division through the Scotland branch there. And I work with a number of different organisations as well. So before I actually get into what GetPsyched's all about, why I started GetPsyched, I'm going to tell you a little bit about what I did before, because that really led me into developing online content and seeing the benefit. The first thing that was there for me as I started my studies in psychology was I had a real passion for networking. I knew that pretty early on that the studies that I were doing were really important, but I was also aware that there were 30 other students in class with me, and I multiplied that by however many unis there were that did psychology courses. So I kind of saw that we were all going to be on a pretty level platform as we qualified, and I wanted to do something that was going to kind of differentiate me. I wanted to reach out to different organisations, different individuals, and I wanted to create opportunities for myself. And we're going to go into a little bit of detail about how I did that. The first thing I did, and there'll be plenty of, especially in Scotland, there'll be plenty of psychologists and organisations that don't thank me for this, but I used to create draft emails. So I created like massive, like big bulk emails with a lot of content about me, what I did, my passion for networking, how I wanted to get in touch with these organisations. And I would customise those emails and send them out to psychologists, therapists, organisations. And I still do this a little bit, but over the years, I must have sent out hundreds, maybe even more emails to people trying to get information about them and wanting to know a little bit about psychology. I would say 99.5% of people didn't get back, and probably 0.3 were a little bit negative, telling me to go away. There's some people that I still am in touch with to this day. But at the time, it was a lot of effort, and I was trying to get as much information as I could about networking. I wanted to know as much as I could, but it took up a lot of time, and I wasn't really getting much in the way of a result. Some of the principles that I applied to that was, I wanted to add value to the organizations where I could. I realized that after a while, I was just kind of, saying, oh, come, I want to learn more about what you do. Maybe we could chat, maybe I could come and see what you do at your office or whatever, like something along those lines, and nobody really wanted that to happen. So I knew pretty early on that I had to try and add value as much as I could. And in one of those ways I did that was I would offer voluntary work. And sometimes this worked. There were a couple of instances where, managed to get some voluntary roles and got some great experience off the back of just emailing some organizations who were, kind enough to take me on and teach me a little bit. But like I said, it wasn't really giving me much value for the amount of time that it was putting into doing it. I was coming up a bit of a brick wall. I was kind of getting up to a dead end. I knew that I knew how important networking was. I knew I wanted to do more than just my studies. I knew that I could kind of get lost in the mix maybe if I just did my studies and didn't really think else about career development or connecting with other people. So I was starting to hit a bit of that brick wall. I realized that what I was doing was I was just basically asking people to connect with me. I wasn't really giving them something to view. I wasn't really giving them anything to look at. They were just receiving a random email, often in their junk email box that they would get back to in about 3 or 4 weeks. They didn't know anything about me. And I realized this pretty early on, that I had to do something more than just email these people. I had to create something. I had to give content. I had to give value to these people that they could recognize me to an extent, or they would have a reference point where they could go to and see a little bit about what I was about and what I did. And that's really where GetPsyched started. It started off the back of me creating content on YouTube, fundamentally. I'm going to go into a little bit more detail about that. But it was as a basis for me to have a reference point for these organizations, these therapists and psychologists that I was connecting with, to go to get to know me a little bit more, get to know what I did more. That's really where it started from. So, some of you might know, some of you might follow some of the stuff on YouTube. If you don't, then go subscribe. It's a shameless plug, but I'm going to be doing more of that as I go. So get used to it. So you might be asking a little bit about what GetPsyched is. Well, like I said, first of all, GetPsyched is a YouTube channel. Every Monday I post content that's in the field of psychology, and I look at various topics. A lot of the topics I look at are topics within the field of psychology that are kind of generally interesting, like, people who maybe don't study psychology, who aren't in psychology, maybe want to know a few things about the topic. But I also look at content for psychology students and psychology graduates and people who are qualified in psychology. I try and cover as many different bases as I can. I do like a mini series about the connection between psychological principles and fitness. I do stuff around, I do like a 4-week study program, and I do a number of other things. I do like book reviews and article reviews as well. Now, it started in kind of June 2017, and since then, GetPsyched has kind of grown reasonably to an extent, but it's gone into different branches as well. We've I've rather mustered a bit of a kind of social media following on Twitter, LinkedIn, Instagram, and Facebook, and I create different content for these different domains as well. So, for example, just recently I started something on Twitter it's called Get Chatting, where we post a psychological question or a psychological topic, and people can debate and discuss that topic and kind of interact with one another. And I do the same for Instagram as well. I create some content for Instagram, so you guys can follow me. Another shameless second plug. You can follow me on those social media accounts as well. Since then, it's grown in other domains too. We now do an audio podcast, which is kind of like an audio format of the YouTube channel, where people can listen to some of the content each week if they're on the go, or if they're on the bus or whatever. If they're driving in the car, they can listen to the content. And as well, there's a website, so you can go into getpsyched.org.uk and you can check out more about what I do. And there's also a written blog on that website. Now, I do a lot of the blog posting myself. I write a number of different articles. But I also have some guest bloggers who come in and write some content for me. Recently, we had I think 3 or 4 maybe from Megan Hemming, who is a psychology student. I actually think she might be here today, I'm not 100% sure. But she did some great articles for us there. So there's definitely, the website content is focused a little bit towards psychology students. So I look at like networking in psychology. I look at developing a poster for a conference in psychology or speaking at your first conference. So there's a lot of different content on that side of things as well. Other ways that GetPsyched is developed is we actually, this is the third shameless plug, we actually are holding a conference in December down in London, December the 17th, me and another organisation called PsychReg, and it's a mental health bloggers conference, so there's still tickets available for that if you can find another 15 quid after this one. So we're, GetPsyched is kind of branching out into events and things like that as well. One pretty cool thing that happened this week is that GetPsyched actually was nominated in the UK Blog Awards. So there's been some kind of bigger recognition of what GetPsychd's doing. You can still vote, fourth shameless plug. So yeah, go vote for that. So yeah, so GetPsyched is kind of growing to an extent. People are starting to recognise what I do there. And yeah, it was pretty cool to get recognised by the UK Blog Awards. It's a bit of a long shot to win, but you never know. Now, I'm kind of trying to put myself in your position. As I was developing this presentation, I kind of thought, where might you be at this point? And I wonder if, you might think, this sounds quite interesting, this sounds good. Maybe you don't think that. But maybe you're thinking, there seems to be other things that I have going on right now that are too important to be considering something else like networking, or even considering developing some content. And what I would encourage you to do is start thinking a little bit about the pros and cons of this, as I have done and have experienced firsthand as well. There are plenty of pros and cons. And for you, I'm understanding, I'm aware that, time constraints might be a big thing. Now, that's not necessarily something I'm going to go into too much detail about, but it does take up quite a bit of time developing content. It takes up a bit of time networking and reaching out to other organizations and other psychologists. But again, it's about weighing up the pros and cons about what you do with your spare time, even when you're not studying as much as the studies that you already do. However, time commitments can be a bit challenging. Also, your studies come first, and I want to get that across as well, is that, I'm still doing my doctoral training in counselling psychology. I know a number of you have some questions about that I'm happy to answer. So that takes up a lot of my time too. I work, I do my placement, I'm an undergrad tutor, like I said. So my studies are really, really important, but I want to get that message across to you guys that there are other things that you can do as well. And maybe if you had some time, spare time during the week, networking, developing some content, or thinking outside the box in some way to get yourself ahead in psychology is really, really worth investing in. It's very much a balancing act. My studies necessarily haven't taken a hit. I haven't prioritized GetPsyched over my studies, at least I hope I haven't at times. My studies always do come first. Work always comes first as well. And GetPsyched very much comes second. But I've managed over the year and a half to develop something that kind of runs itself to an extent. I shoot videos in bulk. I'll shoot maybe 3 or 4 videos back to back to back. And then I'll edit maybe like an hour and a half on a Sunday morning, and then the video's ready to go. So since the start of June, it was a bit of a slower process, but now it's kind of kicked into high gear. So what were the actual foundational principles for me starting GetPsyched? Well, the first thing I wanted to do was I wanted to do something different. I was aware pretty early on that this is a domain, this is an area where psychologists and psychology students don't really want to put content out into. Psychology's focus is empirical research, and that's absolutely appropriate. We need that. We have to have that. It's vital. But are we missing something? I started to ask a couple of questions. Are we really taught everything we need to know in universities and on psychology courses? I don't really ever remember discussing anything about networking with my psychology tutors who are brilliant. But, I think sometimes there's maybe things that we overlook. We overlook the importance of networking and building a network around you. Quite often, I think this is a picture that we have of psychologists. I kind of wish it was. Quite like a moustache and a suit like that. But it's not really how psychologists work these days. We definitely don't have, this is maybe a little bit of a counselling psychology view of what psychology is all about. But psychology has grown. Psychology is in new domains now. It's not just one-to-one therapeutic interactions. And I'm going to talk a little bit about this as I go, but we very much need to meet the world where it is, rather than just waiting in our therapy room and hoping that people will come in. We need to engage with the world at a bigger scale. The other thing I wanted to do was I wanted to expand my reach. I recognize that psychology is huge, as we all know, And there are psychologists all over the world. I wanted to get my name known to as many of them as I could. And I realized that developing online content, developing video content primarily, was a really good way to do that. And of course, I wanted a network. I don't know what that was. Maybe the bell to tell me to stop. I wanted to do more than just my studies. I wanted to work with psychologists out with the UK and actually have had really great opportunities to do that. Again, I'm going to discuss that as I go. One of the other things that I think is really key, and I wanted to get across, we've heard some incredible people speaking about their inspiring stories in psychology. I've been inspired just sitting this morning and listening to Jemima in particular. I thought it was amazing, hearing her stories. I can imagine that at times we feel that there aren't really all that many opportunities in psychology sometimes. I know that there's a low percentage of people that go from psychology undergrad into psychology postgrad and into careers in psychology. And I kind of question why that is, because I think sometimes it's the belief, I know that going into psychology means you have to go into further studies, which can be, dreading for some people sometimes. But I also wonder if we really know what psychologists do, like in the outside world. Do people know what psychologists are all about? And do we really know the opportunities that are there in psychology? I think they're very hard to see at first. But I'm a great believer in the ability to create opportunities where there are none. I came to learn pretty early on that psychology now and again has plenty of naysayers, people that say that you should be focusing on empirical research, you should be focusing on your studies, you shouldn't be looking out with or trying to develop new realms of opportunity in psychology. And I have heard that from psychologists, that's not just me making that up. I want to get us over that hurdle. I want you guys to appreciate that there are huge opportunities in psychology. One of the highlights of the past year and a half for me is actually being able to speak to you here today to do this keynote. I was blown away now when I had that opportunity, but it stemmed from the fact that I had started developing online content. I had started GetPsyched, and it led to this fantastic opportunity to get here and to hopefully educate and inspire some of you guys. There are plenty of naysayers. There are plenty of people who say, you shouldn't be going into this realm in psychology. All we had to do was listen to what was being said this morning to realize that that's the case, but it's never really true. There are so many opportunities for you guys in psychology. So there's been plenty of things that I've actually learned from GetPsyched, things that are applicable to my studies, things that I think are applicable to you, and to developing a career in psychology. The first one is that, I had to learn how to improvise. And when I say improvise, I had to improvise with my time. I'm quite organized. I ensure that I dedicate set times to set things, and I dedicate what I'm doing there and then to that task. So if I have a few hours early in the morning to get university work done, I commit 100% to doing that only. Then if I dedicate a certain amount of time to GetPsyched, editing, if I set a couple of hours, maybe late one night, that's all I do for those couple of hours. I just edit my videos, or I just network, or develop other content. So improvising with my time has been really key. Resourcefulness is really important too. I've never invested a huge amount of money in GetPsyched. I haven't really invested any money. I'm still a trainee like you guys, which means I'm broke. So I don't invest a huge amount of money in GetPsyched. I still put my phone on like a shoebox to video to film the videos. I don't invest in huge amounts of equipment. So I had to be resourceful with what I was doing. I wanted to create quality in a budget, and that has also helped into my studies as well. I had to be creative. This is something I'm going to talk to you about in a bit. But I have to think up topics each week. I have to think of questions each week. Like I said, I bulk shoot those videos, so I kind of do it in stages. But I do have to think up scripts and think up content that's engaging for people and that people want to watch. Confidence is a big thing, although I wasn't 100% sure how well that had been when 5 minutes before this talk I was extremely nervous. But confidence has been something that's built for me after I've done GetPsyched. It was quite nerve-wracking putting yourself in front of a camera and then listening to your voice back again and again and having to edit that. But you develop that as you go. And determination. One of the things I'm going to talk a little bit more about is the fact that you have to be determined when you're networking, when you're thinking outside the box, when you're trying to create opportunities for yourself out with your studies. You have to be relentless. You have to be determined. You have to believe that it's going to work. When I was creating the initial videos, there wasn't a huge amount of growth. Nobody was really watching them. I didn't have any subscribers. I didn't have any followers, nothing like that. But I had made a commitment for at least a year I was going to see this out. So I had to be determined with what I was going to do. There's been plenty of ups and downs, and there are plenty of ups and downs to networking. There are plenty of ups and downs to thinking outside the box when you're looking for opportunities in psychology. And I'm going to go through some of them with GetPsyched. So the downs, overcoming your expressing your own opinion is a key one. And that's something that when I was, well, still am a trainee, but especially when I was an undergrad, I was really reluctant to express my own opinion in psychology. I knew how much that could get me in trouble. You know, we always use empirical research, empirical findings to back up what we're saying. And I do that on GetPsyched as well, but at the time it can be really challenging to think, gosh, is this what I think? Is this the opinion that I hold in psychology? There's going to be plenty of people that are maybe going to see this. I don't know who's going to see this. People could give me negative feedback. So getting over expressing my own opinion and, you know, having the confidence to reach out to people to network was something I really had to get over. That was initially, especially in the initial stages. Slow growth is key as well. And what I'm trying to get across to you guys is this isn't necessarily you creating your own YouTube channel or something. Maybe you do want to do that. But slow growth in the sense of networking in general can be slow in the initial stages. It's kind of getting a ball rolling at first. It can be really, really challenging. But it's worth it as you progress. I also had to learn on the go. I don't have a background in media. I don't have a background in IT or filmmaking or anything like that. So I had to really teach myself these principles as I went. I use kind of free software online. Like I said, I haven't invested much money in GetPsyched. But I had to teach myself these principles and how to edit, how to film as I went. Like I said already, creating quality on a budget was key. I haven't put much money into GetPsyched, but I wanted to ensure that I had the best quality videos that I could. And engaging and outreaching is time consuming. One of the keys to growing your kind of established network group is you have to invest time in trying to connect with as many people as possible, and that takes up a lot of time. The ups, one thing I would say is I've actually realized is that in psychology attracts a certain kind of person. Somebody who's very supportive, people who are kind, people who are encouraging. And I've experienced that even when I sent out those big draft emails at times. Yes, I got a little bit of negative feedback now and again, but for the most part, people that did get back to me were super supportive. And I think that's a big up. You know, when you're thinking about networking or developing something of your own, the likelihood is you're going to get great support from people that you tell in psychology. Psychology attracts a certain kind of person, and that person is often very encouraging. At least I've found that anyway. Another thing I would say is that the opportunities create themselves. It kind of snowballs to an extent. You create some content or you network, and you never really know where that's going to go. Maybe you've got an idea for a therapeutic organization in your area, and you want to pitch that. You want to try and network to them and see how you can get involved. You never know what's going to happen in a couple of weeks or a couple of months as that person gets back to you. So these opportunities really do create themselves. And engagement and growth develops over time. Like I said, these things are time consuming, and in the initial stages it can be slow, but as you go you can increase that engagement to a huge extent. So what have been the benefits so far for me from actually starting GetPsyched? Because I think that's important to get across. It's one thing to put time into this, it's one thing for you guys to put time into networking, to put time maybe even into developing content, but you want to start seeing results. One of the biggest things that happened for me over the past year and a half was I was actually invited out to an international conference in the Philippines, in Manila. And the organization that this was attributed to was GetPsyched, who I'm running this mental health bloggers conference with in London in December. And the CEO of that organization had seen GetPsyched. He had seen the videos online. He'd seen some of my blog content, and I wrote a few guest blog posts for him here and there. He quite liked those ones as well. And he called me up, he got in touch with me over Twitter, and he asked if I wanted to come out to the conference and actually speak. You know, flown out, put up in a hotel, I was out there for a week in Manila. And eventually, I was out in this university in the Philippines speaking to this international audience a year after having developed my first video in GetPsyched. I spoke on my research topic in counselling psychology, which is men's mental health. It was a really surreal experience. I think there was probably about 700 to 800 delegates there. It probably increased. It was like a 4-day conference at one of the biggest universities in Manila. There were film crews there. There was like news, TV stations. It was insane. There was huge panel discussions as well, and I was networking and engaging with that audience on an international level, which was one of my goals for when I first started GetPsyched. Now, this was only 1 year into creating those videos. I didn't have a massive following at that point, but all it took was one person who owned GetPsyched, the CEO of GetPsyched at that point, to see the content and actually give me an opportunity. He liked the fact that I was trying to do something extra, that I was trying to do something innovative, and that I was putting in the effort to actually reaching out to a bigger audience, and he wanted to be a part of that. And as a result, I found myself out in Manila speaking to an international audience. The reason I say that to you, the reason I bring this to you, is that networking, creating content, thinking outside the box has got great benefits to it if you just believe that it will. There's huge, huge opportunities if you're thinking about doing more than just your studies. So there's another side to this as well. I think it's important that we consider as to why this is important, not just for yourselves, but for psychology as a whole. This is the impression I think sometimes we get, at least when I speak to my friends about what psychologists do. I think these are the initial impressions that we have. Again, this is a very counselling psychology focused series of images. But I think that's primarily what people think psychologists do. And it's important, and I love this part of my work, but I also want to change the perspectives of people about what psychology is all about. I was reading in the brochure, actually, I think it was one of the programs, and I think it's the chief executive of the BPS, and his first sentence says that we need skillful, experienced, intelligent psychologists now more than ever. And I think he saw my slides beforehand and copied that, because I totally agree with him. We need visionary, we need progressive psychologists. We need psychologists that are forward-thinking, that are willing to put themselves on a platform where the world is. Like I said here, we need psychologists that meet the world where it is. There's plenty of psychologists I know, at least in Scotland anyway, which is ages away from England, but that don't even have a website. They don't have a website. They just sit in their therapy room, so to speak, and just hope that clients will eventually find them, which is mad. This is 2018. We need psychology to be on that platform where the world is. If you're on TV and you scroll through Facebook or whatever like that, there's plenty of trash on that. There's plenty of nonsense on that. And I think we get scared because we think, psychology is going to be influenced by this negative field, or the negative aspect of social media, when actually maybe psychology can positively influence social media. We need those psychologists to be on that platform, and that's one of the things I'm really passionate about when I develop GetPsyched content. We also need psychologists to be front-facing. It's not about being recognizable or anything like that, but if I ask you to think of a famous psychologist, or I ask the general public to think of a recognizable psychologist, they're going to struggle with that. They'll be able to identify all the Kardashians, but they won't be able to tell you who a psychologist is. And I think there's an issue there. That's what I think we need psychologists to be more recognizable, to be front-facing, and to be in the public domain. Yeah, we need psychologists to be in the public awareness. And we need psychologists to play an active role in society. And you might think that these points are really big and it's got more than just developing a YouTube channel. But I think it starts at these points. I think it starts when we create online content, when we are on social media, when we're talking about articles, we're talking about psychological principles, we're discussing these points with each other. We're maybe even creating blog content on a topic that you're passionate about and putting it out there online for people to see. I think that's really powerful, and I think that's a really positive thing that we can be doing as psychologists. So, what can you do off the back of some of these principles? What are some of the things that I would maybe advise if you're thinking about networking, if you're thinking about thinking outside the box to engage and create opportunities for yourself in psychology, even if you're thinking about creating some content yourself? The first thing to do is to network and reach out. I would actually start with drafting up some of those emails. Just don't tell them that I told you to do that. But drafting up some emails, maybe sending them out to psychologists in your area, to some psychology organizations as well, and asking, maybe I could come and volunteer, I could come and learn a little bit more about what you do. I would also say kickstarting your social media, primarily Twitter. That's really where I kind of started on Twitter. Was I would engage with other Twitter feeds that had bigger followings. I would comment on their tweets and add value where I could. I'd retweet and share articles as much as I could and build a bit of a following that way. You could also even think about developing a WordPress website. That's actually the one area where I put money into GetPsyched, is buying a domain name and buying the email, and it really didn't cost a huge amount. Something you could consider. I developed getpsyched.org.uk myself. I didn't have anybody do it for me, so it's a pretty simple process once you teach yourself that, and it gives you the opportunity to perhaps write some blog content yourself and start publicizing that. And what I would say here as well is to engage with different organizations. Don't just sit and wait and hope that networking opportunities will come to you. Go out and actually create them yourself. Off the back of that, I'm going to kind of thought about this, and I thought, I want to add as much value to you guys as possible. So I'm kind of giving an open invite to anybody who thinks that they're interested in this, to anybody who thinks that they want to take part in something similar to this, is to perhaps write a guest blog post for the website. It's also great for me because then I don't have to think up more content. You guys can do the work, but you'll get credit for it, don't worry. And publicize that and things like that. So this is one of the ways that I started, was where I wrote guest blog posts for organizations, and it went down really well. And you can get really big exposure. So if you're thinking about creating content, if you're thinking about networking, this could be a really good place to start. One of the things I think we could do is, if you've got a suggestion, you could maybe write that suggestion on Instagram stories and tag me, and then we could chat over my DMs on Instagram. So that's an open invite to anybody that's interested. So just to kind of finish up, might be a little bit early, but if that's okay. Is that all right? Okay, we're on point. Good. So some key points for us to consider. Networking is super powerful. Engaging with other services and with other people is key, and it's bigger than just your studies, and it can get you ahead, and it can create some opportunities for you. What I would also say is to be consistent, not to just give up in the early stages if you think it's not working, if you think you're not really getting much engagement from anybody. It's to be consistent as much as you can. Be innovative as you can be, and think outside the box. If you are looking at some of the things on GetPsyched, maybe you watch some of the videos, you follow me on social media, and you think, gosh, I could do that. Don't come and tell me. Do it yourself. Go out and do it. Or maybe you think you could do this better. That's great. Again, don't come and tell me, or maybe you want to tell me that you think you could do it better. But go out and do it yourself as well. And the question I want to leave you with is, what can you do now to think about your career progression in psychology? What can you do in this moment, in this weekend, like we heard from David at the start? This is an awesome event. This is a great experience. This is a great chance for you guys to network, to ask questions, to find out more about psychology. So how can you take the biggest advantage from being here as possible? And thank you very much for listening. You can get in touch with me on email, and you can follow me on social media. Thank you.